question, what counts as evidence, is central to clear thinking, scientific reasoning, and informed decision-making. As a teacher, I would emphasize that not everything that feels convincing is actually evidence, and not all evidence is equally strong. Understanding what qualifies as evidence and how to evaluate it helps you avoid being misled by opinions, emotions, or incomplete information. In simple terms, evidence is any information that supports or refutes a claim. But for it to be meaningful, it must be reliable, relevant, and verifiable. The challenge is that in everyday life, people often confuse evidence with belief, assumption, or isolated experience. To begin with, it is useful to distinguish between claims and evidence. A claim is a statement that something is true, while evidence is the support that justifies that statement. For example, if someone claims that a particular study method improves performance, the evidence would be data from controlled experiments, consistent results across multiple groups, and verification by independent researchers. Without such support, the claim remains an assertion, not knowledge. This distinction is important because many people accept claims simply because they sound logical or are presented confidently, without asking for supporting evidence. Evidence can take different forms, and some types are stronger than others. One of the most common types is empirical evidence, which is based on observation and experience. This includes data collected through experiments, surveys, and measurements. For example, scientific studies that measure the effects of a drug on patients provide empirical evidence. This type of evidence is generally strong because it is based on systematic observation rather than personal opinion. However, even empirical evidence must be carefully evaluated to ensure that it is collected and interpreted correctly. Another type is anecdotal evidence, which comes from personal stories or individual experiences. For instance, someone might say, "This method worked for me, so it will work for everyone." While such experiences can be meaningful, they are not reliable as general evidence because they are limited and may not represent broader patterns. Anecdotal evidence is often influenced by personal bias, selective memory, and unique circumstances, making it one of the weakest forms of evidence when used alone. Expert evidence is another category, where information comes from individuals with specialized knowledge or experience. Experts can provide valuable insights, especially when they rely on research and data. However, expertise alone does not guarantee accuracy. Experts can disagree, make errors, or be influenced by personal or institutional biases. Therefore, while expert opinion is useful, it should be supported by empirical evidence and not accepted blindly. A very important category is statistical evidence, which involves numerical data and patterns. Statistics can provide powerful insights when used correctly, such as showing trends, correlations, and probabilities. For example, data showing a consistent relationship between a behavior and an outcome can be strong evidence. However, statistics can also be misleading if they are manipulated, taken out of context, or based on flawed methods. This is why understanding how data is collected, analyzed, and presented is crucial for evaluating its reliability. In addition to types, evidence must meet certain criteria to be considered strong. First, it should be reliable, meaning that it comes from a trustworthy source and is free from significant bias or error. Second, it should be valid, meaning that it actually measures what it claims to measure. Third, it should be reproducible, meaning that other researchers or observers can obtain the same results under similar conditions. Reproducibility is a cornerstone of scientific evidence because it ensures that findings are not due to chance or isolated circumstances. Another key aspect is relevance. Evidence must directly relate to the claim being made. Irrelevant information, even if true, does not count as valid evidence for a specific claim. For example, citing unrelated facts to support an argument does not strengthen it. Similarly, sufficiency is important. One piece of evidence is rarely enough to establish a strong conclusion. Multiple, independent pieces of evidence that point in the same direction provide a much stronger foundation. One of the biggest challenges in identifying evidence is avoiding common mistakes and misconceptions. People often confuse correlation with causation, assuming that if two things occur together, one must cause the other. For example, if people who drink more coffee tend to perform better in exams, it does not necessarily mean that coffee causes better performance. Other factors such as study habits or lifestyle may be involved. Another common mistake is relying on authority or popularity as evidence. Just because a famous person or a large group believes something does not make it true. Bias also plays a significant role in how evidence is interpreted. Confirmation bias leads people to focus on evidence that supports their existing beliefs and ignore evidence that contradicts them. This selective attention can distort understanding and reinforce false conclusions. To counter this, it is important to actively seek out opposing viewpoints and evaluate them objectively. In practical terms, evaluating evidence involves asking a series of critical questions. What is the source of the evidence? How was it collected? Is it supported by other independent sources? Are there alternative explanations? By systematically addressing these questions, you can assess the strength and credibility of the evidence. The concept of evidence is not limited to science. It applies to everyday life as well. When making decisions about health, education, or career, relying on strong evidence can lead to better outcomes. For example, choosing a study method based on research rather than hearsay increases the likelihood of success. Similarly, evaluating news and information critically helps you avoid misinformation and make informed judgments. It is also important to recognize that evidence is often probabilistic rather than absolute. In many cases, we cannot achieve complete certainty, but we can increase our confidence in a conclusion by accumulating strong evidence. This is why scientific knowledge evolves over time as new evidence emerges and old conclusions are refined or revised. As a teacher, I would encourage you to develop a habit of evidence-based thinking. This means not only seeking evidence for your beliefs, but also being willing to revise those beliefs when new, stronger evidence becomes available. It requires intellectual humility, the willingness to admit when you are wrong and to update your understanding accordingly. In conclusion, evidence is the foundation of rational thinking and informed decision-making. It is not enough for a claim to sound convincing or to align with your beliefs. It must be supported by reliable, relevant, and verifiable information. By understanding the different types of evidence, evaluating their strength, and avoiding common pitfalls, you can develop the ability to distinguish between well-supported claims and unsupported assertions. This skill is essential not only for academic success, but also for navigating the complexities of modern life. Ultimately, the goal is not to achieve perfect certainty, but to base your beliefs and decisions on the best available evidence, continuously refining your understanding as new information becomes available.